let's keep our focus on NWSL while March Madness is still happening all around us, because match week 1 is coming up quick. And we've got all kinds of stuff ready to roll out for the build up to the opening weekend on Saturday and Sunday. But we wanted to start with an overall preview. If you've been running with us, if you've been on tour with us, you know that we have already completed 12, count them, 12 full team previews for every club in the league. We rolled out our team by team previews on Attacking Third, and every single club out there has, our thoughts and opinions on where we think they might finish. We chatted a little bit about, off-season overview for each team. We talked about players that we would like to see have impacts for their respective clubs this year, players who might depart during a World Cup cycle. We asked the biggest burning question, and we even had some fun with a little bit of a prediction. And that's kind of where we want to settle in on this. While we were doing some of our previews, we didn't really put numbers on those things. We kind of gave ranges a little bit, and we want to chat a bit about all 12 clubs going into this weekend and actually put some numbers on some of these predictions. So maybe just to recap here, in terms of where we slotted the 12 clubs across 1 through 12 for the rankings, we had, in terms of a final 3, a big 3, we had Portland Thorns, OL Reign, and Kansas City. We had San Diego Wave within the top 4, possibly low as 6. Chicago Red Stars, Houston Dash, Gotham FC, we had them in the 5 to 8 ranges. Including North Carolina as well. And for 7 to 10, we had Angel City, Racing Louisville, and 9 to 12 for Washington Spirit and Orlando Pride. So we had to set them up, right? Someone's got to be number 1, someone's got to be last.
When there's a winner, there's a loser.
When there's a winner, there is a loser. So we want to get a little bit more specific. We want to place the number with the team, and these are, at this point, still considered probably way too early predictions. But we're going to have fun with them, because if we're right, it's going to be awesome. And if we're wrong, it's also going to be awesome, because we get to talk all about how incorrect we were. But I'm going to ask you, buddy, do we want to go like 12 to 1? Do we want to go 1 to 12? How do we want to do this with everyone joining us today?
Let's go 1 to 12, because either way, it's a surprise, right? Like, yeah. I think that it'll be a little bit more unsurprising if we do it this way.
All right, I'm with you. Let's start with number 1. We love a winner. Attacking Third. Here's who we think is going to go and finish out number 1 in the regular season, and this includes maybe lifting that trophy at the end of the year too, right? But that's maybe a conversation for a later day. But in terms of closing out the regular season, we've got Kansas City at number 1 for 2023. We just this is the team that we have been talking about nonstop throughout their offseason, into their preseason, and even now, 5 days out or so from match day 1. Kansas City Current is a team that we are chatting about, and we liked all their moves. We thought it was very not only calculated and specific in terms of the positional areas that they were trying to flesh out, but the presence that they also had on draft day, adding the young pieces that they have added, especially in light of a World Cup year, right? We were also looking at that too when we were looking at how we were going to place these teams 1 through 12. Every team's going to lose players this year. Every single team. And that includes a side like Kansas City, but we just sort of feel the areas that they targeted are going to help keep them in the conversation and keep them afloat and keep them picking up results in light of certain absences on this team. And we think not only did they do enough work in the offseason to go ahead and contend once more in 2023, but that they did enough to actually go all the way.
Yeah, I think that's why we put Kansas City at number 1 to finish the year, because of everything they did in the offseason, everything that they did last year. Honestly, like that's kind of where we start the growth and the honestly the judgment of a team and breaking them down and the analysis of it. I think Kansas City's gonna go number 1 at the end of it all. There's a lot of positives to take away from last year in the offseason. But it will be difficult. I mean, this season's going to be really hard. It's going to be so close. But with our top three, I think those were some of the hardest to kind of break down and say, where are they going to fall in this? Because as we have Kansas City current at number one, our number two team to finish second, runner up, just missing out technically on the Shield in our eyes that these predictions, is 2022 champions, Portland Thorns. We've placed them at number two in our power rankings heading into the season. They've got a new head coach in Mike Norris stepping into it. There's not too many changes to what they were doing from last year, but I like what's happening there with Portland Thorns. So we put them at number two. And then number three, OL Reign. I think that Laura Harvey's going to fall a little bit short of the Shield, but still a top three finish, host in the playoffs. But that's our top three: Kansas City, Portland Thorns, and then OL Reign.
I love that. Let's have some fun with the middle of the pack, because I think that is really the area of the picture on the table that kind of gets a little bit gray sometimes for folks, where anything can happen. We're talking like even from like 4 to 8, right? In terms of that like wide spectrum of the table. We're looking at number 4, number 5, number 6, and number 7. In the following, we've got San Diego Wave FC at number 4, Houston Dash at number 5, New Jersey, New York, Gotham FC at number 6, and Chicago Red Stars at number 7. So we've got one team sneaking back into the playoffs and making their return, and we've got another team falling just short.
Yeah, I think that the breakdown between 4 through 7, or really 4 through 6, is tricky, because in our eyes, these are all playoff contention teams, or teams that will make the playoffs. They're not on the bubble. I think San Diego for sure. They're just going to be scratching at the door for a top 3 spot this year with what Casey Stoney has done in San Diego. And obviously they've got Alex Morgan and Naomi Girma and Kaylin Sheridan, just really award winners last year, whether it's a goalkeeper of the year to Golden Boot winner to defender of the year, rookie of the year. They've got a stacked team that also didn't have a lot of shakeup in the offseason and what they were doing. Now, there's a World Cup year, and we'll talk about that a little bit more, because there's going to be a month, 2 months, 3 months where some of these players are going to be gone, and that's a big chunk of games. So San Diego for us falling at that number 4 spot. And then between Houston, Gotham, and Chicago, I think that for me, Houston being the number 5 of those, so the top of those 3, and then Gotham and Chicago, I think that Houston and Gotham, those two teams people are excited about Houston and Gotham. They're excited about the offseason acquisitions, what was done last year for Houston, making their first arrival in the playoffs in the postseason for the NWSL. And when you look at who they won't be losing during the World Cup year, that's impressive to me on a Houston Dash front. They've got Diana Ordonez, Maria Sanchez, Ebony Salmon, who most likely will be with England at the World Cup, but just a lot of really strong players. They return Katie Lind in the back line, Katie formerly not in. There's just like a lot of positives for Houston. And I think Gotham's a team that has turned things around this offseason. They are a club that is looking to break into the playoffs again after finishing last in 2022. This is a team that really wants to turn things around. So we have them making the playoffs, being right on the bubble as a number 6 seed, having to play in the opening round and having to travel and be on the road, but they make it back to the playoffs. And I think if you're a Gotham fan, you're pretty happy about that and where they stand at that point.
Yeah, I think. Listen, we were running down this middle of the pack, and you have to look at what we talked about. I think during those team by team previews, who are the players that might go missing for long stretches and periods of time for their team in Houston. While they will miss some players, they also have such good pieces that are going to just be with the team from match week 1 all the way through to the conclusion of the regular season. I wouldn't be surprised if they end up hosting, another quarterfinal match for 2023. It was a really big deal for them to finally break through last year in 2022. I don't know they want to build on that. It's why they made the move that they made. They went out and they hired Sam Lady. They went out and they got Diana Ordonez to help build some more around the attack on this team. Sure, it's hard to believe. I think maybe there are going to be folks out there that are like, oh, like, how are you going to put Chicago out of playoff contention when this is like a club that has constantly been in the playoff picture for years and years and years, right? Since 2015, they've got, Mallory Swanson, who's in ridiculous form right now, really good goalkeeper, and Alyssa Nair, and all those things are true. All those things are true. And we think they're going to be in the playoff conversation, but we just don't know if it's going to settle out that way for the Red Stars. That's because of the type of year this is. There's probably going to be some players who go for the World Cup for certain teams, and they might not play a ton of club season based on how long they might participate in the World Cup, right? And that's including the preparations ahead of that and everything that comes with the rest and rehabilitation after a World Cup. So those are big pieces for Chicago to lose, right? Your number one goalkeeper and then your number one goal scorer, right? And where maybe a team like Gotham, we're looking at a team like that will also have pieces that are missing, but they're likely to have I think some more cohesiveness and just some more structure around them in terms of what they're going to present moving forward. We're going to have some more fun in terms of later on in the episode of players that we want to see step up, in terms of this season. And I think Gotham has a few more of those than some of the other teams within this middle of the table. So let's talk about this bottom half of the table, where this can also get into a lot of fun, right? Because some of these teams, even last year at number 8, we were still talking about some of these teams in contention for the playoff picture. But for this year, when we're looking at the standings 8 through 12, we've got Racing Louisville at 8, Angel City FC at 9, North Carolina Courage at 10, Orlando Pride at 11, and Washington Spirit at 12. This was just difficult for us to sort of rank these as well, because we're like really high on some of the rebuilds for some of these teams, right? Some of these teams 8 through 12 have gone through some retooling. Some of them are full on in a rebuild. And there's areas within that, when you're talking about that for a club, that you can find things to get excited about. And we are excited about some of those things for some of these teams, but you still got to flesh them out and rank them and put a number on them. And so this is where we think they're going to sit 8 through 12.
Yeah, so Racing Louisville 8, Angel City 9, 10 North Carolina Courage, 11 Orlando Pride, and 12 Washington Spirit. I'm going to look at the bottom here, because North Carolina, Orlando, Washington, bottom 3 teams, it's tough to kind of think of that, because especially a year that Washington is coming off of number 10 or number 11 last year in 2022. And although they did take some steps forward in the off season, and we do think that is a year with hiring new head coach Mark Parsons, formerly at the Thorns. There are going to be some positives at Washington. There's just not enough changes. They lost too many pieces. They lost too many defenders. They're going to lose way too many pieces during World Cup in the middle of the summer. That this really is the rebuild year for Washington Spirit in our eyes. It's a club that is going to need to kind of just lay down a fresh slate, have expectations that are attainable. That way they can get their confidence back up, because to go from winning the league in 2021 to a bottom 2 team in 2022, that hurts your confidence and that hurts the team's morale. Getting some players back from injury, I'm looking specifically at midfielder Tori Huster. That can help this Washington Spirit side a bit more. But ultimately, I just don't see them breaking through out of the bottom 2. And that's why we listed them at 12. They're going to be bottom of the table at the end of the year. Orlando Pride, they're right above them, which is a team that has struggled. They're going through a rebuild. When we talked about Orlando individually as a club and how they could take steps this year, we wanted them to lay the foundation, have that first set of building blocks on the ground before they continue to take those steps. And ending the year with Seb Hines and on a bit of a high for Pride last year helped, but now can they take those next steps and move forward? So that's why we put them at 11 and North Carolina at 10. I think that with our bottom 3, North Carolina is the best of those 3 at that point with what they were able to do. They had 4 first-round draft picks. None of them really tickled our fancies that much, but I think that with what Sean Nahas is trying to do at North Carolina, perhaps that's what he wanted, players that he could mold to be exactly who he needs on the pitch and when he needs them. They were able to sign all 4 of their draft picks, which is not very usual, not very likely in this league. So hoping that can continue to kind of kickstart this team for North Carolina. But that's our bottom three, 10, 11, 12, rounded and out with Washington Spirit finishing last.
I love that we're putting numbers on these because I can't wait to like revisit these even mid-season, and be like, oh, look how incorrect this one is.
But we have to do it. We have to do it.
I know. I feel like I feel like the Spirit are probably like freshest in our mind too, because I know when we were cranking out our team by team previews, we did them in alphabetical order, and so we had Spirit as the final team to kind of focus in on. But I think almost similar to Chicago for me when I'm looking at this Spirit side. They're just 2 years removed from that NWSL championship run. And it was, I think I said on the team preview at the time, it was such a unprecedented type of series of circumstances that presented itself to this team. And it's really kind of, we saw them kind of rally around each other and just go, 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 go. And it kind of carried them all the way through an extended postseason, right? As a bottom seed. I think they were a 6 seed at the time, or if they were a 5 seed at the time, all the way through to the final. And going up against probably an equally depleted and going through things type of team in Chicago. And to follow that up with another tough season where they had to deal with and on a training incident with their former head coach and investigations around that, and a really match heavy loaded kind of schedule to start out their season. We just sort of saw all of that kind of affect the team. And when we're looking at, I think, a World Cup year as well for some of these teams in these rankings, there's a possibility that they're going to be without Andy Sullivan, that there's a possibility that they're going to be without both Sanchez and Rodman. And Ashley Hatch is someone who's also gotten into these national team camps as well. And I know you and I are like curious about how that final roster is going to look. What does it look like if not all of them go? What does it look like for the Spirit if Ashley Hatch is left off that roster and Sanchez and Rodman are going to the World Cup? You've got a player like Hatch kind of on an island at this point, who's very successful because of the pieces around her, and somebody like a Sanchez and a Rodman. So it's tough. It was tough to put Washington, I think, at 12.
Yes.
But there's so many things, I think, when you're looking at number 8 or 9 or 10 or 11 or 12, for a lot of like these storylines going into 2023. And I love that you mentioned Houston, because I think there's going to be a big bright spot on that. I think this is going to be a player who is actually making a return at the exact time when a team like this needs a player like Houston moving forward. So, there's other teams, I think, that can surprise any other team, right? Given whatever match week it is. But all the new pieces combined with what are a handful of some of these core players that have been Spirit players for some time, I think they're gonna need some time to gel, right? Because there's also a new head coach as well. So I think that's why we kind of have these settled out the way that we have them. And I'm eager to get back here and talk about whether we were right or wrong. That's half the fun when we're talking about these types of things, whether it's predictions or power rankings or otherwise.